I wanted to start again with my gold nuggets, this new kind of video content that I want to share about mining for gold. And I'm calling it Gold Nuggets. This is gold nugget number 2. And all of these videos and everything are going to be uploaded to a brand new resource, which is a Mining for Gold YouTube channel. Just started it this week. You can go in there and get all kinds of content. Right now, there's not much on there, but we'd love for you to subscribe. And we're just going to start loading all kinds of material to just help leaders thrive. That's what Mining for Gold's about, helping you thrive as a leader and multiply your influence. That's what we do in Mining for Gold. And so this is gold nugget number 2. Just wanted to share from a little bit of my background as a military helicopter pilot. So today's gold nugget number 2 is called upgrades, and I'll describe that in a little bit. So there are 3 different types of gold that we think about in Mining for Gold. The first is the gold, the unique DNA we carry that reveals Christ to the world. That's our gold, who we are. The second is the gold that others carry around us that we need to mine for and help draw out through the principles that of mining for gold. And then the third is the lessons, the principles, the wisdom that God is sharing with us at any one time. We need to mine for the lessons, the things that He's teaching us, in any particular time. So anyway, and this resource is about that third thing. What are the lessons? What are the leadership lessons? What are the things that could benefit us when we're learning and going through anything like this, COVID-19 crisis and all the changes? Well, there's a particular one that I want to share today called upgrades. And there are just times when we go through an upgrade in our leadership. We go through from one level of doing something and leading, either with a certain amount of people or a certain level of complexity, and then we find ourselves being brought into a whole nother level. A biblical example would be David with sheep. Goes to the valley of Elah, defeats Goliath, and he becomes, a soldier, and he's for a while there he was a court musician to King Saul, and then he goes into becoming a soldier. He goes from shepherd to showing up at a battle and defeating a giant, and then he gets this upgrade, and on up into the kingship. Well, God seems to do that with leaders. We get to a certain place, we bring a certain amount of ability, background, giftedness to a role, and then all of a sudden it just seems like that's over, like a season is shifted, and we're having to go through another learning curve to go to a higher level. And that's such an important thing. And so I hope this gold nugget number 2 called Upgrades helps you. And how I'm going to frame it has to do with my background as a military aviator. So I graduated in ROTC from Duke University, and then headed over to flight training right after that. And had 6 years as an aviator in the U.S. Army, and I went through 6 different upgrades of aircraft, and I'm going to describe all those just in a minute. But I went from one helicopter to another helicopter to another helicopter, and each one required a different level of knowledge, a different level of skill, a different a change in the cockpit was different, and all that. I'm going to describe all that in a minute. But we're coming back to leaders. I think that God, He does this. He brings us to a certain place. He grows us. He matures us. He has plans for us that are maybe there's certainly plans for now, but there's plans that He has for us for our calling in the future. And we don't get there in a day. We go through seasons. We go through upgrades. We call them in the military transitions. So from one model of aircraft to another. I'll describe all that in a little bit. But I want to say that God orchestrates this. If you look at the history of anyone in the Bible as a leader, Joshua, Moses, David, Daniel, any of these, Peter and Paul and John, and then look throughout history, you'll just see how one of the principles from my book, Mining for Gold, is that God is the refiner. He's interested in your growth. And not only is he interested, he's in charge of it. And he orchestrates relationships and opportunities and people and lessons and all to grow you and expand you, that you come into the fullness of what he created you for. So today is called Upgrades. And so let me just start to frame it before I get into the aircraft part, which I think will be a lot of fun. There are times in leadership where you just come to a place where you either feel stale a little bit, or you feel a little stuck, or you feel like you've been going through the motions of something for quite a bit of time. It feels a bit routine. Some people might say, well, I could do this in my sleep. I've seen the same patterns, the same issues, the same challenges in this one role. And then it just seems like, like we go from, summer to fall to winter to spring. All of a sudden, something's shifting. It could be a new opportunity comes. It could be we've lost a job, or we've, in COVID right here, where things are being completely turned upside down. Something new and more is being asked of us, and we have to respond. So speaking to today's situation with the whole COVID health crisis, this is a time when it's really important to ask and to pray and to press into God and say, what do you have for me after this? What is the next thing for me? What would represent an upgrade, if you will, in my thinking, my behaving, my leadership practice, my influence level, my productivity, the things that I produce. There was a time which, I had always dreamed. I have a degree in journalism. I always wanted to write, hope to write a book. And then all of a sudden this opportunity comes, and I'm asked to write a book about what I've been sharing in this thing called Mining for Gold. And oh my goodness, I have a friend, Steve Mitchell, who was the editor and the head at that time of InterVarsity Publishing in London. And I mean, I had never written on that level, and it about killed me. But he pushed me in a beautiful way, and he challenged me, and he sharpened and made me dig deeper to get an upgrade in my writing. And man, that was hard. But it was a great result. There's a book now that can be shared, and people are reading it. So it's something I'd always hoped to do. But then when the upgrade came, I had to focus on the skills, the principles, the tools of writing. I downloaded a software called Scrivener, which is a writer's software, and all these different aspects, reading about different great authors that I respect, C.S. Lewis and different authors, and just study, because in that place I was getting an upgrade in the part of my walk or calling that had to do with writing. So when you're stuck, when you're in a place that you feel kind of still, you need to think about and pray into just, Lord, you might just feel this restlessness inside, this sense of something has to change. And then a lot of times a change will come. And it's the pivot. It's how well we transition. It's how well we move and shift with that pivot that makes us be able to go to that next level. So now I'm going to dig in to tell a little bit about my background. So I was just shy of my 21st birthday, I think, when I headed down to Fort Rucker, Alabama. I was a newly commissioned second lieutenant in the U.S. Army, and I was heading to flight training. And so I did 3 months of an officer, leadership basic course, and then I started flying. And the first aircraft I was in was a TH-55 helicopter. It was made by Hughes, which is the Howard Hughes company, and it was just this teeny little, we called it the lawnmower, or some people called it the bumblebee, because it had this, I think it was like 120, 140 horsepower reciprocating, piston engine, and it kind of buzzed like that. And you had only two people, had a little glass bubble, and you sat in it with your instructor. And it's what you learn to fly a helicopter in a TH-55 trainer. And I mean, all the controls were the same. It had a cyclic in the middle, and a power collective, and foot pedals, and all the very, very simple basic instruments. But it was still flying, which I would call leadership. It's still flying, but all of a sudden I'm learning. It's probably like your first leadership role, but here I am, and oh my gosh, I could tell a million stories about this little TH-55, and we'd be on these stage fields, and there'd be just like, dozens of these little, ants, like this, learning how to hover. Anyway, so it was a very small little helicopter called a TH-55. When we get done with that, I think it's 6 weeks or so, 8 weeks, we transitioned into the UH-1 Huey, which is the main helicopter, the kind of the bread and butter at that time. This was 1985. For utility, and it was the helicopter used in Vietnam. UH-1 made by the Bell Corporation, and it was much bigger. It was much wider and longer. It was much faster. It could carry a lot more. It was a lot heavier. And it also had instrument capability. So not only am I now going from a little TH-55, we go from that little reciprocating engine into a turbine engine that's way more powerful. You hear the whop, 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 whop. Now you're using the same controls, but so much more power. And it took a while. You're still flying, but you had to go through this upgrade, or a transition, they call it in the military, to this UH-1. And man, it took time. I'll explain a little bit, but in a minute. But it took a while. And so the next aircraft, when I got finished with that, I went to an OH-58 Scout helicopter, which was the Bell version. You've seen a lot of these, maybe news helicopters and all. The smaller, light observation. I was a forward area controller. I did a lot of battle leadership kind of jobs, coordinating different firepower and stuff from that little helicopter. But it was faster, it was sleeker, it was kind of a sports car kind of in the helicopter world. But very, very maneuverable. And when I went from the UH-1 to that, it was a whole nother learning process of how do you do a real powerful, fast, smaller helicopter? What will this thing do? And you get into that machine. It's completely different from the UH-1, completely different from the TH-55. And I learned that one and get a lot of tactics and different trainings with that one. So when I left flight school and I got to my unit, we had UH-1 Mike models, which were the gunships. I was in an attack battalion. The UH-1 Mike model, which is an M, stands for M, was a gunship with like a M60 machine gun mounted on either side, and maybe sometimes rocket ship pods on either side, and that's what they used a lot in Vietnam. And that was the first aircraft I got in at my unit. I wasn't even a pilot in command. I just would fly, and we would do these training and missions in a Mike. Then we transitioned. We'd just gotten in when I first got there, what's called the AH-1 Cobra. Now this one is not side-by-side pilots. It's a pilot in the back and a gunner in the front, and that has whole different types of issues where it looks different, it feels different, it's more narrow. It was a difficult actual helicopter to fly because of the weight to fuel, and flight ratios were really, really tough. And so, but it was a pure gunship. and it shot all kinds of things out of it. And so there was a whole nother thing, adding gunnery on to all the other things that you do, and it flew different, and it still made my bell, but it was really, really different, and a strange thing to go from this type of flying to this type of flying. But again, through all these transitions, flying, the same control, cyclic, collective, pedals, instrument, the same, characteristics of aerodynamics and flight. It's just you're doing all kinds of stuff. And then another thing is we really started to focus on a lot of night flying. And so whether in the OH-58 or the AH-1, we would start using night vision goggles at that time, which is another upgrade, flying with these goggles at night where you could see all kinds of things in the dark. And there's a whole nother upgrade. And then the last one, which I didn't do a ton of hours in, but I did get some time in the cockpit flying, was the AH-64 Apache. And so I got into that aircraft, mainly in the front seat, and just learned by the incredible power of these now twin turbine engines, incredible guns on that thing, rocket pods, and a gun in the front called a Gatling gun that would just burst all kinds of weaponry, and it was connected to the pilot's headset. Wherever he was looking, that gun, that Rockwell gun, would move. So a whole nother learning curve. Same flying, but much, much more. And again, that was not my long-term aircraft, but I also flew it some. So what does this mean? And each one of these aircraft was an upgrade. Well, a couple of things about leadership now. One, when you get an upgrade, everything's in a different place. Like the buttons and the things that you had were like, oh my gosh, well, it's not where it was. Somebody's who's moved my cheese. It's not the same way that it was, and that can be disruptive. The thing to remember there is that it's still flying. So when you go and upgrade in leadership, you're still leading, but things feel different when you get to a new place. They have this odd, it's like things are not exactly as they were. So you have to develop your own disciplines to kind of stay steady. It'll have a different feel on a larger. So for instance, when you go from one to another, the aircraft moves a whole lot faster than the others. And so one of the key things when you go to another level of aircraft is how fast you get. You used to be at this many miles per hour, and you're a lot faster. And so when you get down into it, you do not have the luxury of waiting. You have to be thinking on a higher, faster level when you get an upgrade in aircraft, because you're going to get to where you're going faster, and there's less margin to play around because that thing's moving fast and is much heavier than what you had before. So you have to think faster, think further ahead, and your reaction times need to be anticipating the speed of the aircraft. But then again, all of them have the same instruments. They fly the same. Even when we put on night vision goggles, by that time, you're in completely blacked out helicopters, but you're still flying, but your visual has changed. And that's just saying another upgrade. It's like you get into a new role, you have to change the way you're leading. In COVID right now, you might have to go to digital online tools. You might have to restructure some of the things that you're doing as a leader. Go to online team meetings and lead a virtual team for a period of time, or any number of things. And maybe you're just seeing that you're undisciplined in a lot of your practices, and where you're going, you can't waste as much time, and you need to get a planner or something. Basically, because the higher you get in leadership, the more things that are coming, and it's important to learn how to narrow. It's important to learn how to focus. That's probably one of the key things. As you went up through leadership, as you went up through helicopter transitions, and the more complex it got, you had to focus on a few key things. You took all the learning you had and all the hours you've been building, but to fly a complex helicopter, night vision goggles, to do an attack helicopter mission that like we used to do, took a tremendous amount of focus and discipline. and practice and experience on a lot of different leaders and pilots and all to pull that off. Same in leadership. You bring all that you bring, but then you come to a new thing and you have to adjust. You have to adapt. You have to get the feel. You have to move the controls around. You have to feel what leadership looks like in this next level that you're at. I remember when I went from being a local leader to a national leader in the vineyard movement for Multiply Vineyard Coaching. I remember my boss saying to me, Tom, you're still thinking on a local level. We're now talking about a nation and a country with thousands of leaders, in many different settings, and you're going to have to upgrade your thinking. Boy, that was helpful. I was still thinking at a local regional level. So as you're changing right now, as things are affecting you, I just want to end with a few principles about upgrades that hopefully will help you. And that is this, as you're making leadership changes. The first is that be patient when you get to that upgrade. It takes time. It takes, we call it hours, reps in maybe shooting basketball. It's how many shots you're taking. But if you go to in flying, it's how many hours you have and how much time you have sitting in that cockpit. Because literally everything, the buttons are different. It feels different. You sit in a different position. The way you look out at the screens outside is different. It doesn't fly exactly the same as others. And so be patient when you're learning an upgrade and just sit in the seat of the new place. Pray, ask God to help you, and observe where you are. What's different? What's the same? What are the key, focal points that are going to be needed in this new leadership place? So be patient. It's going to take time. And the second principle of upgrades would be lean into the transition or the upgrade. Meaning, I kind of talked about it in the surfing example of catching waves. You're going to have to adapt to where you are now. You're not flying that old helicopter. You're not in your former position anymore, unless you kept it. But usually when an upgrade, you let that one go and you move up. And now you're in this new space. We used to call it leadership by walking around. Peter Drucker called it that. But get out, meet the people, get to know the ones that you're leading, find their strengths, mine for the gold in those people, and say, who are the people I'm leading and what are their talents and abilities? What is the technology we're using at this upgrade? Does it move faster? Do we need to use different tools? Just assess basically what is the difference between what you were doing and the new upgrade. And you have to swim. You got to paddle towards it and learn. Maybe you need to take some courses. Maybe you need to do some other training or go to some schooling or something. But that's definitely true. I mean, I'm either reading books or watching things on YouTube or following podcasts when I'm going into a new thinking level, and I'm learning. Leaders are learners. You're always learning, especially if you're going to go to those other levels. You can't stop learning. You don't reach a plateau of learning. And learning is life. Learning is fun. Learning is enjoyable. So, adapt is a second principle of upgrades. The third would be build on what you've learned, but still be where you are. Meaning, so all the lessons you bring, everything you've learned about trust and vision casting and even having to discipline or bring feedback to people about their performance or budgeting, financial situations, or all of the stuff you've learned from a previous leadership position. Build on that and take that with you. You're not going to leave that behind. But I've found that over time, leaders refine their key values. So maybe in a transition, say, what is the thing I need to bring from where I came? What are the key values, the key practices, the key principles, the key leadership lessons that I want to get a journal? I love to use the Michael Hyatt planner, full focus planner. That thing is just gold to me, man. I just, use that all the time, but it keeps me focused, and it helps me build on what I've learned and stay in touch with my values so that I'm not losing me as I'm going through the different transitions. So build on what you've learned. And then the fourth principle, two more. You're going to have to let go of old mindsets and old practices that won't work in your new role. Kind of like me going from local to national in the coaching world. I just had to go, okay, I need to be quiet here and listen and watch and learn and listen to some of these people that have been leading on a national level more than I have, and learn from them and listen and be quiet. And all of a sudden, I started to realize there were some old mindsets in my head where I was thinking on this level. In an aircraft, it's flying at this many miles an hour, and all of a sudden you're flying way faster. You can't hold on to that old thinking. You're going to crash. You're going to hurt somebody or break a machine. In leadership, it's the same way. You'll need to think and maybe put down on paper what it is that you're having to let go of, because at each new place, it's a little bit like this, but it's a little bit like, a butterfly in a cocoon. You were one thing, you coming out, you're still the same thing, but you're new, you're different. You emerge from a transition like a cocoon into another leader, and you are different. So just like a caterpillar is not the butterfly, and the butterfly has to let go of the caterpillar self person, you need to do that. I want to say that you're not losing you, but you're letting go of old mindsets and old practices. The last thing I would say, or just a couple thoughts, are to journal is a great way to capture what you're learning. Get something that you can write down regularly in your quiet time or praying, where you're really writing down the gold, the lessons, the leadership things that you're getting. That helps a lot in a transition, so you can go back and look and see what you're needing to lean into and what you've learned, and kind of remind yourself. Prayer, of course, is so important. Be praying about what you're learning. Ask God to help you, give you wisdom, give you favor and insight and adaptability to do well and serve your people and serve the vision of your business or your ministry or whatever role that you're in. And then I love to say this: just find another person you can mine for gold in, or pour some of what you're learning into. I really believe in. I've had it all throughout my career. Somebody further ahead would work with me, and then I just wanted to pass that along to someone else. That's the whole purpose of this mining for gold thing. What I love about this, the ability to share this, is just love helping others. I want them to prosper and do well in what they're called to. And as I love to share, do that. Share with someone. Look at someone coming along, a younger leader, someone who's wanting to get some new nuggets of lessons and actually help them. Share. It always is true that when you're a leader or a teacher, you learn more than just being a student. So take what you've learned and become some bit of a mentor or instructor for someone else, and share the principles so that they can come up to where you are. There's no limit to what God might do. I love the quote of D.L. Moody. He was praying. I can't exactly remember who it was. I think he was in the UK, and someone said, God is not, the world is not seeing what God will do to a man who's wholly committed and focused to the kingdom of God and the glory of God and his role in it. It was something like that's a paraphrase, but there's just more. I just really believe there's more for all of us. There's other levels. You can't make them happen. They don't happen in your timing, but when they come, and right now this COVID crisis is one of them, it's a shift. It's something different, and you need to pay attention and see what kind of upgrade, see what kind of change is happening right now for you. So I hope this is helpful. Gold nugget number 2 on upgrades. I'll be praying for all of you and all of the changes you're making. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this. And have a great rest of your day. God bless you and all the upgrades that you're going to be having over the next, throughout your lifetime, and especially right now in all this change. God bless.